Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Hello and welcome to the Disappearing Mind podcast. I am your host, Dawn Platt, dementia coach, advocate, and memory care professional. Today on the podcast, I'm very excited to have someone that I met. We're exploring a story that is as raw as it is redemptive. This story of this person that I met was a unique way that I met them, but I just thought that this young man's story was filled with hope. It's a story about a boy who grew up in a trailer park, surrounded by instability, uncertainty, and a mother battling lifelong depression. A story about how that same boy became a man of faith, a meteorologist, a motivational speaker, an author, a husband and a father, and ultimately a caregiver. Our guest, Jerrid Sebesta, author of Life Undeferred. When I first met him, he was speaking at a senior living board meeting conference in Florida. And what struck me about him was his honesty and his humility. It struck me immediately. Jerrid is a very unique individual. We're going to dive in today into his journey that really shaped him. It shaped him by hardship, but it also shaped him by grace. And he is, I called him a chameleon, and he kind of chuckled about that. But he has a journey marked by reinvention and resilience and a deep sense of purpose. So welcome to the podcast, Jerrid.
This is incredible. Thank you. I don't get an opportunity to share my story on this type of platform. So this is a first for me, and I'm really excited to dive in.
So today we're going to talk about your childhood. We're going to talk about your mother. We're going to talk about you being a meteorologist, and we're going to talk about the author in you and all of the change and impact that had. So I'm very excited. I get excited a lot, Jerrid, in case you didn't notice.
I can tell. I love that. I love excitable people.
But I think that your story is impactful. And as I said to you just earlier before we went on, your story of being a son and your story of being raised in hardship and really even your story of your mom is not unique to me. But what is unique to me is the fact that you use that to your benefit. You use that in a way that's very unique. And the uniqueness of that is what I want to tap into because there's hope for people who may be on the early part of this journey. They may be in the middle, or they may be caring for a dying friend or parent who is in the same situation as you were. So let's begin. Jerrid, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, where are you? I mean, that's a loaded question. Yeah, you kind of covered the gamut. Yeah, I'm a Minnesota boy. Parents divorced when I was young. Was pretty much raised by my mom in a trailer home for much of my upbringing, and we'll dive into that. But always had a fascination of science. I grew up in a trailer home, and so I always thought I was going to die every time the wind blew, which is kind of a joke, but it's kind of serious at the same time. Went into meteorology studies in college. Actually played basketball in college as well. And then ended up landing my first career, so to speak, in TV. Did that for 12 years, had a chance to travel all over the country, made it back to my home state of Minnesota at the top station, left very much cold turkey, spent 10 years in the financial world. I was the director of business development for a retirement planning firm. And then I fired myself from that career 2 years ago, had committed to writing a book and now get a chance to travel the country and teach and speak full time. But in the meantime, especially in the last, I would say a year, especially 2 years, God has given me these incredible, very, very deep, very, very sacred experiences, one of which was the passing of my mother just in the last year. And all of these stories have kind of conformed to get together and helped me get to where I am here today. And so a lot of people have dealt with some hardship. and that is not certainly uncommon. But I'm just so grateful and thankful for the road that I've been on, and I feel like at 47 years old, I'm just getting. I love how you call me young, by the way. I appreciate that. But I feel like I feel like I'm just kind of getting started. Like everything has kind of been the pregame to this point, and I'm really excited for each and every day that comes my way because I get a chance to, again, live out my story in real time, and God gives me these incredible experiences, many of them good and many of them difficult. And if we have the right perspective, these things will elevate us because I believe that's what this life is meant to do, is to actually elevate us. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, and they don't live with that perspective. And that's not a perspective that I lived with for many, many years.
Absolutely. So you did it again. You always do it. Every time I hear you speak, you make something out of what some might consider hardship, and may not have the positive frame of mind that you have. But you are a husband and a father. You have how many children? Four children. Wow. Wow.
I think we're done. We were joking last night about having a fifth, but I don't. We'll see. To be determined.
Wow, that's impressive in itself. So I want to talk a little bit about before we get into the dementia side, and really even your childhood. You have a book, and I bought that book. Actually, it's a pretty easy read, but you're a motivational speaker, a life coach, I believe. Tell us about your book and what your book is about, and where my listeners can get it.
Sure. Easiest place to get it is just on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get it. It's called Life Undeferred, How to Discover the Dream Life Already Inside and Live the Bold, Exciting You. I think that life should be bold and exciting. As we grow and morph and mature and become more of who I believe we're created to be, life should become more exciting and bold, and we should have more impact and fulfillment and peace. I think that these are all the cries of the human soul, and I found myself in so many ways living the opposite, and I think a lot of people get stuck in that rut. So this is for anybody who wants to take their life to the next level. I talk about some fundamental truths that are true for every person watching or listening to this. And if we can have the right perspective and understand the movie that's being played out, life is our greatest teacher. It will give us exactly what we need. And so many times we don't have that right lens on. And so life can sometimes feel grueling or like we're enduring it. And again, that resonates with me because that's how I viewed life for the first 4 decades. And I felt like life was always happening to me because of kind of the uncertainty and a lot of the dysfunction of my childhood. I felt like I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a say. And so I planted the flagpole in my life, on New Year's Day, 2022. And I said, I'm done playing small, and I'm done not co-creating the life that I want. And that moment has led me on a journey the last 4.5 years now of growing and expanding. And I see things I didn't see a year ago. And I certainly see things about my life that I didn't see, 4 years ago before I had that moment. So the book opens with that particular moment about planting a flagpole and the transformation that I've experienced since. And now I get the honor of traveling all over the country and sharing with groups and individuals the same transformative power.
So that is the theme that runs through your life. I called you a chameleon because I feel like you are one, and certainly in your book. So that reinvention tactic, that reinvention gift, actually, that you have, you've rebuilt yourself more than once. And for many people, reinvention is terrifying. But you seem like it's almost natural.
I'm either really bold or really stupid, one of the two. I'm not really sure which one. I think probably takes a little bit of both. Yeah, I walked away from my TV career when I was at the height of my career. There was nothing wrong, air quotes. It was at I was in my low to mid 30s at the premier station that you could possibly want to be at in the upper Midwest, and I walked away cold turkey with no plan. That caught a lot of people off guard. But, I still get asked today, 12 years after that, that transition, and people say, why did you leave TV? Why did you leave? And again, I've been able to kind of I can articulate it better now than what I could when I was in it. But if I have to really give you the reason, I felt like I was being called into something bigger. There was nothing wrong with it, but I knew there was something more inside of me. And I remember thinking one time, I'm like, I feel like I'd be slapping God in the face if I just stayed in this another couple of years. And that's no disrespect to my old employer and to the business. It was just, I was being called into a different arena. And then I spent 10 years in the financial business and managed to, really be at a great position, at a great job with a great employer, making really good money with not a lot of stress and pressure. And same thing, I felt like I was operating at like 15%. In fact, I said to my wife on that proverbial walk on January the 1st, 2022, I said, I feel like I'm operating at like 15%. Like the world is only seeing 15% of what my soul is crying for. And I think in each and every one of our lives, if we were honest, there's this longing, there's this desire that wants to connect something really deep that we've been ingrained with by our Creator, and it wants to be expressed into this world. We're each an instrument in this, magnificent orchestra, and we get to play this role. And there's this longing that if I've done anything right, I've taken quote unquote risks or jumps to be in alignment with my soul. And every time I do that, again, God gives me what I need to not only sustain but grow and transform. And I just want to let you know, and I'm not saying this flippantly. The life that I'm living now was unfathomable 2 years ago, probably even a year ago. And so every time that I engage with that process, what I think is possible goes to another level. And again, going back to the subtitle of my book, this is what makes life bold and exciting, and that's waiting for everybody if they can see it and choose to engage with it.
Your lovely wife must be an incredibly supportive woman. That's all I can say.
I get that a lot. When I share my story, people often say, I'll take my readers off here. They will often say, what does your wife think? What does your wife think? And you're right. She is a gem. No, she is a gem. I will say this, this is me. Like I'm all over the place. I'm kind of the guy who's all over the place. She's the steady Eddie rock. Right. And, while I have had, again, a lot of success in different careers and, very visible careers as well. People used to watch me, and I would share these things inside that were very, very dark. It would catch a lot of people off guard because I didn't show that. They didn't see that. But who did see that? She saw that. And so I couldn't tell you how many conversations we have had at 3:00 in the morning when I'm, pacing around the house or, doubting myself. And I'm very tall. I'm 6'6". You can't tell on this viewing, but I'm 6'6" and she's 5'5". And so over the course of years, we'd have these deep talks, and she would grab me by my shirt collars and she'd look at me and she would say, if I could take it from you, I would. And it is that darkness, that dark side, right? And so every time that I've made these jumps, she's understood that it's not about chasing some success. It's not about that. It's about becoming who I was created to be. And what's interesting is that I think a lot of people don't take that jump because they're waiting for the healing. They're waiting for the shift. And what I've seen in my life is like they parallel. As I have taken the initiative and the faith and the jumps and the leaps, right, into the unknown, so to speak, I find the healing in the process. It's simultaneous. And so as I discover more who God's created me to be and living that out in my life, what actually happens to my soul? I have peace. I have that healing that I was always looking for. So with that being said, when I made this last jump from my business or my financial job, we have 4 kids at the time, a couple of teenagers down to a 2-year-old, and never once did she doubt the money or what was going to happen. She trusted me, and she knows that she knows that this next level is what was actually necessary. So yes, I have a very, very supportive spouse in that.
Great story. So let's dive into your childhood, some of the chaos and early caregiving that came in your life. So you shared that you grew up where instability was normal, a trailer park, a broken home, and a mother who struggled deeply with depression, and yet you speak about it with such clarity and compassion. Tell me about your childhood and your relationship in the early years with your mother.
Yeah, we had a very, very close relationship. Again, my parents divorced when I was 8, which is nothing uncommon. My dad moved several states away, so I only saw him a few times a year. And then my brother at the time, who has recently also passed, which we'll talk about, but he was 10 years older than me at the time. So by the time I was 8, he was 18. He was out of the house, so I was kind of raising an only child. So it was just me and my mom. And my mom worked very hard, and she, at her core, a great person. She grew up on a farm in eastern South Dakota. She had an alcoholic father. She was the youngest of 4. She would tell me stories of her childhood, and I really didn't even understand the levity of those until I became an adult. But very, very tumultuous childhood, and I would say grew up with a big hole in her heart, and obviously not physically, but like emotionally and spiritually, and I think at her core felt incredibly unworthy. She struggled with depression and anxiety and low self-esteem. I don't know what the diagnosis would be, but chronic low self-esteem would probably be one of them. And so I remember her crying a lot. That was probably and there were a lot of good times. Don't get me wrong. And by the way, I want to honor her with everything I say here. So in no way, shape, or form this is me blaming anybody. Trust me on this one. There's no, there's no hard feelings here. Yes, but there was it was a lot of crying, a lot of, you never knew what you were going to get. My mom could go from being in a good mood to going in a very, very dark mood very, very quickly. On top of that, you had my older brother, who was already an alcoholic at 18 years old, in and out of jail, even as a teenager. And all these ups and downs and all the chaos between her and my older brother. And they were very much, again, I'm not a psychologist, but lived a very codependent type of relationship. And so there was all of this chaos. And my dad, again, is, a couple of states away. And so it was all of that chaos just kind of fell into my lap. And so I took on the role as the hero. And so if you study families that have addiction, there's kind of these different roles, and there's usually this outlier. There's this outlier who just doesn't look and act like the others, and that was the role I took on. And so there was just so much chaos that I tried to be as in line as I possibly could to just try to outpace that. So I kind of turned into this striver. I turned into kind of this nervousy kid, because I was the emotional barometer. And I took that kind of into my adulthood. I became like a chronic perfectionist. I remember vividly working this is when I was not in college, younger, but working on a project when I was in 5th grade and lamenting over this project. And my mom looked at me and she goes, "It's good enough. It's good enough." And I said, "Mom, it's good enough for you, but it's not good enough for me." And I was probably 12 years old at the time. And so I understood that, and I didn't understand this till recently, but the success that I had in 2-decade-long plus careers in 2 different industries, a lot of that success was really a defense mechanism. It was really me trying to stay ahead of the impending problems and uncertainty that is going to come and get me. Guys like me, or guys like I used to be, don't relax well. We don't vacation well. We don't take a lot of days off. I remember the first job that I had in TV, I left that job after 5 years, and I think I left like 42 vacation days on the table that were unused, because I just never took a break. I was always grinding. And again, the interesting part is that you're commended for that. You're commented on that. Like, look at this guy. He's so loyal. He's such a hard worker. But if I looked at the why as to behind that motivation, it was very much driven in fear and scarcity. And that really hit me hard during COVID. 2020 was one of the darkest years that of my adult life, just because of the uncertainty. It was global. You couldn't get away from it. And I remember being so afraid. I was so afraid during that time. And with all due respect, I wasn't that afraid of the virus, but it was like how the world was shifting, and politically, and all of these things were shifting so rapidly. And I remember just being terrified. I remember looking at the future, and it was black. It literally had a color.
Absolutely. It was limiting. It was limiting, right? For somebody like you, it was limiting.
Yeah, nobody was making dreams. Nobody was making plans. Nobody was planning vacations. And I was like, that's it. Like, this is as good as it's going to get. And it's all down from here. I mean, that's how dark my mind was literally 5 or 6 years ago, which led into me kind of making this shift. I had to get to that point where I was so again, not to use cliche, sick and tired of being sick and tired, but it stemmed from a mindset. And again, I'm not blaming my child, but it stemmed from a mindset of the uncertainty and atmosphere in my home that led to that heart position that I have now shifted from and teach others to do.
Absolutely. So when did you first sense that it was no longer depression, that your mom's struggles, when did you sense it was dementia?
That's a great question. And I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
But my mom, again, with all due respect, she was like a child. And I know and I've learned through psychology that like when you go through trauma as a child, which she went through a lot of trauma, it almost stops your development. And while my mom was a grown woman, obviously, there were so many aspects of her looking back where she had the mentality of a child. And so I wrote off a lot of her mental illness, air quotes, as that's just kind of how she is because of how she was raised. As she got closer and older, looking back, you could kind of see where there was trauma and then mental illness starting to kick in. For the last 10 years of her life, she was living a state away. And most of her kin had all passed. She was the youngest in her family. So a lot of, her brothers, her sisters, her parents, obviously long gone. And so her only family were me and my brother. Well, remember, my brother was an active alcoholic up until his passing last year. And so I was kind of the only, functional one, so to speak. And so those last 10 years where she was living on her own before she went to memory care, my phone was ringing all the time. My phone was ringing from her landlords, from her friends, from the police department, from the sheriff's department, from clinics she would visit, from her pharmacist. And I remember always defending her, not defending her in a fight type of way. But, they would say like, well, your mom came in and she acted like this. And I'd be like, well, you haven't known my mom's always been like that, and I would say things very flippantly, do not look into this, but I'd say like, my mom's always kind of a little crazy, because she was, and by the way, my mom could be a lot of fun. When she was in a good mood, she was a lot of fun. There were a lot of good times. And since she has passed, I've reconnected with my cousins who grew up with her, and they say, your mom was so much fun. And she was. But she was always kind of a little crazy. She grew up in that time of big hairs, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, and going down to the cafe with her girlfriends and chatting it up and gossiping about everybody in town. And that's kind of how it was. That was her relationship with her older sister, who was her best friend. They would talk every day and just talk on the phone and cackle and all these things. And I really saw my mom's mental health really take a dive when her older sister, Noreen, passed away in 2020. That was her best friend. And by the way, if you look at her childhood, her older sister, Noreen, was, I think, like 8 or 10 years older. She was kind of her caretaker. That's where my mom went for peace, because there was so much chaos with her alcoholic father and family. And so her older sister was kind of her best friend, her confidant. And when she lost that person, that was it. I made a commitment to my mom in 2020 when her older sibling passed. I said, I will call you every day. I would talk to my mom very frequently, but I made a commitment to her, and I told my wife, I'll try to talk to my mom every day, because she's living by herself. And now she doesn't have her sister. And it was after that where you really saw the shift, where you could really start that decline. And it got really, there was one time I got off the phone with her and I was so frustrated because we were trying to make some plans. I can't remember what it was. I'm sure she was constantly getting kicked out of where she was living because she couldn't handle her finances. And I tried to develop a plan. Again, I'm very logistical and logical. And I remember getting off the phone one time and I said to my wife, I'm like, I could make plans with my 7-year-old daughter, and she would understand the plan. But I talked to my mom and she's got it. And I talked to her, 5 minutes later or the next day, and it's as if we've never talked. And so there was these signs back then.
Who told you?
It was really starting.
Who actually told you and you received that your mom had dementia? How'd that come about?
It was up until the end. Again, it wasn't that I was in denial. I was just fighting for my mom's freedom. So the last 2 years, especially, I was getting phone calls from, her caretakers, her doctors. And, again, by that point, she's not working. She hadn't held a full-time job for many years prior to her passing. And so her job was just to kind of make appointments and go to doctor's appointments and get new medications. And who knows if she's taking the right medications, right? But it was pretty apparent probably those last couple of years that that was the diagnosis. And again, I live in truth land. Like, I want to know the truth. Don't tell me what you want me to hear. Just tell me the truth so I know. I know. And I could never get that. And it'd be so frustrating, right? She said, the doctor said this, and then they said this. I'm like, what did they say? Well, I don't really remember, And so again, my mom was incredibly stubborn. Holy cow. And change was unfathomable for her. Just even moving apartments was a big ordeal, right? And so it was like the last 2 years, people are like, you need to get her into a facility. And I'm like, but she's going to hate it so bad. And I know what's going to happen. Her mentality is going to drop like a rock. So I'm like, where was that line of like helping her and maintaining her freedom, but also getting her the care she needs? And ultimately the decision was made for me. And I think God knew, but it was getting pretty bad near the end. And she had walked herself into the emergency room 3 times, I think, in 24 hours, which is a no-no, especially when there's not really an emergency. And the last time that she walked herself into the emergency room, her doctors were calling me and they said, we're considering not letting her going back to her home because she was living fully, on her own at the time. And she said, they said, if she comes back here in the next 7 days, we're going to hold her and we're not going to let her go. And so, of course, I got on the phone with my mom and I was like, what's going on? Well, my Medicaid, and again, it's just chaos. Right. And by this point, I knew we were kind of there, but I didn't know what to do, And I said, I'm just going to tell you, Mom, if you go back to that emergency room, and by the way, she's still driving at this point too, which is still, that's another story. I said, if you go back there, they're not going to let you go. Oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. And she calls me 6 hours later and I said, where are you? She's like, well, I'm at the emergency room. And I'm like, why? Well, they didn't ever give me my medication. And sure enough, the doctors held their word. They said, we're not letting her go. And the only way we will release her is in a 24-hour care. And so now the ball was in my court to try to find her a place. And so by that point, though, I was actually relieved. I was so relieved because now the decision was made. So it was made. I had no choice. You know what I mean? And so everything that happened thereafter was because it had to. And again, part of me was relieved.
Jerrid, caregiving can be a burden and people see it that way, but you were always a caregiver. And so that reality, right, or that ultimatum or what happened really just solidified how it was going to go from there. But you were always a caregiver, but also it can be a gift. And I want to hit on that for you because you always were a caregiver, differing levels. I'm sure you're a caregiver today, like you fix everything, you figure it out. Right. But it was also a gift. And, I, as a dementia coach, really see that as your strength, that chameleon-like behavior and you take care of everyone. And I myself am that way. But, it also gives you kind of a chance to rewrite old narratives and actually to heal. And you made a statement that I thought was profound. I don't think everybody says it, but you considered it an honor. Tell us about that, to care for your mom.
Yes. I wouldn't have considered it an honor when I was going through it. There were times where I waffled the boundary of trying to overprotect and inject too much of me into her situation. And then I'd kind of pull back. And I felt like I found it as best as I could near the end. She then went into memory care facility where she lived another 9 months. I actually got her across state lines into my hometown, which was incredible. So I had a chance to see her almost every day. And her condition went down pretty fast during those 9 months compared to where she came in and where she ended. But I always try to see her through the lens by which God saw her. I would share a lot of the chaos that she brought into my life that I didn't have anything to do with, and I would have certain people and mentors to say, you know what, maybe it's time for you to kind of divorce your mom and move on because it's so toxic. And while I respected that advice, That was something that helped me reanalyze my boundaries, but I could never just divorce her. I never felt like I could, that I was called to do that. And so leading up to literally her last breath, I did the thing that I had been doing since I was 8 years old, because I always wondered, how come I was her person? How come I was the number that she dialed whenever she was in trouble or afraid or scared or depressed? My phone would ring. And trust me, my phone rang a lot in 40 plus years. And she wanted the truth, and I would always give it to her. She believed a lie about herself. She felt unworthy. She felt unvalidated. She felt unlovable. She was never told that she was loved by her father. She hated herself. I did not have to stretch to come to that conclusion. I would find pictures of her with my grandkids, and she would take a scissors and cut her face out because she couldn't stand looking at herself. She hated seeing herself in the mirror. And so I would tell her this all the time, but I told her that up until her last breath. I just said, I go, Mom, you're a beautiful woman. I loved being your son. She always worried that she wasn't a good mother. And while she made a lot of mistakes, I always ensured her in those last hours and moments that she was an incredible mom. And I was honored to have her as a mother. And when she took her last breath, I literally said out loud, it was me and her in a room by ourselves. And I said, Mom, you finally know the truth. Hallelujah. And so that night, she passed at 10:30 in the morning, and it was the most powerful moment of my life. Not the best, but it was the most powerful moment of my life. And then that night, my wife asked me, she goes, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel so honored. I feel honored that I was given this role, that I was chosen to be her son, that I was given the role to love her even at times when she was unlovable." I believe that we are called to honor our parents, honor mother and father. And I felt like I did that to my best ability, literally till her final breath. And so I felt very accomplished, yet honored that I had that role chosen for me. And so that's how I received it. I received it actually with honor, and I was so grateful because I didn't know how that story was going to end. I was just hoping and praying there wouldn't be a time where she would pass in her apartment afraid, or she fell, or she committed suicide. Again, if you deal with somebody with mental illness, that's always in the back of your mind as well. And she passed at a time where hopefully she found some healing. I found incredible healing, and God gave me the gift of being there till the very end.
I have so many questions for you. But here's one I think that is impactful and will help listeners who can relate to your story. But what do you hope that people understand about dementia that your family learned the hard way?
Wow. After my mom passed, I was so moved by the caretakers of her at this facility called Bethesda that 2 weeks after she passed, I organized like a little 20-minute party for everybody on her wing. And I made my mom's favorite dessert, which is also my favorite dessert. It's chocolate cake with chocolate drizzle, which is basically chocolate chips and butter that you put on top of the chocolate cake. It's phenomenal. And I made that for everybody. And I had a chance to get, these 30 nurses and caretakers in one room, and I shared the story. And I was just deeply moved by the care that they gave, not only my mom, but the other people in that wing, which is they're angels without a shadow of a doubt. And afterwards, this young lady comes up to me and she goes, "I remember when your mom got here." She goes, "She talked about you all the time. When you were here, she talked about you." And she said, and I didn't know that my mom said this, but she goes, "Jerrid was literally sent here by God to help me navigate my life." Now, right. Right. And she was just she was just incredibly emotional telling me, and it makes me emotional, talking about it. And I never heard my mom say that, and nor did I think that she thought that. And so I guess to answer your question, I think the answer I would give is that this is it's hard to see it like this, but it's actually a gift, because it gives you the opportunity to love somebody unconditionally. Because when they're in a demented state, as you know, they're unable. They're biologically and physically unable. And when you can rise above that and love somebody through that, it's easy to love somebody who's lovable, but sometimes it's hard. It's very hard to love somebody who many times can be abrasive. And my mom, again, was very lovable, but she could be very abrasive to the people that were trying to help her the most. And again, no disrespect to my brother who has since passed, and God rest his soul, but he was the one that struggled the most with his life. And and I would chuckle and I would tell him this. I go, when you get mom on the phone, she's offering you money, like she's offering to send you money that she doesn't have. And I go, she gets me on the phone and then she starts yelling at me for like why I got her in this facility. And I'm like, that's interesting, But again, it was for me to be able to kind of look through that. So again, I would just challenge listeners to be able to look through that. Because that's how God sees us, right? And so when you do that, it makes your heart more God-like. And I think that is just an incredible honor and journey that we're all on.
Well, thank you for honoring the caregivers. They work very hard, and I don't think that they get the credit that they deserve, whether they're at home or working in a community facility, memory care, nursing home. They do a great job, and they do their best job. So I am so glad that you got to hear from them, their side. We get so close to people in the dementia journey when we're on the caregiving side. We become part of their lives and really connect with them. So we're often able to share with families things that they had no idea that their loved one was expressing. But if you could speak to the younger version of yourself, the boy in the trailer park, what would you tell him now?
Oof, man, you ask good questions. Not used to this type of interview. This is what I would say, and he probably wouldn't understand it because I don't even know if me 5 years ago would understand it. But what I would definitely tell that kid is that everything is actually happening for you, and it doesn't seem that way. In fact, I say this to business professionals all over the country. I said it earlier this week when I was in Florida on stage speaking to a group of professionals. This world looks really chaotic. We view life through the surface of the ocean, right? You look at the surface of the ocean and waves are crashing and there's white water and there's, all this chaos. But if you just go even 30 or 40 feet below the surface, even though the ocean may be, who knows, miles deep, it's calm, it's peace. Everything is in order. Everything is as it should be. And so I would try to remind that kid in the trailer park that this is all happening for you. I don't know if he would understand it, but that's what I would tell him. And the interesting thing is that's what I tell my kids right now. We live in an interesting world. I don't feel bad, but kids, this is a tough world to be raised in right now with the internet age and all of the different pressures. And I have 4 kids from 15 down to 2. That's the thing. I'm 47 years old. I have a 2-year-old. And there's a lot of different emotions and personalities in my home. And I remind them that there's a specific reason why you have the brothers and the sisters and the parents that you have and the struggles that you have. It's all actually happening for you. And that was not something that I realized until 5 years ago. And everything shifted when I changed that belief, that perspective. Because then when the cataclysmic happens, like the loss of a family member or dealing with somebody with dementia. By the way, we don't have time to go to my whole story, but like I had just quit my job a year prior to my mom passing, and I lost my identity right after I launched my book, which was incredibly hard. And we haven't touched on this yet, but 10 weeks after my mom passed, my brother passed away of an overdose. And I had these cataclysmic events, dropped into my movie that were uncontrollable, but I needed to go through each of one of those events in the exact order at the exact chronological time for me to understand something about what is happening in my reality that gave me the perspective. So when my mom passed, it didn't crush me. Was it painful? Yeah, it's painful. But did I suffer? I did not. In fact, after my wife asked me, this is true. After my wife asked me, how do you feel the night my mom passed? I said, I felt honored. And then I said this, I actually feel so powerful. I felt like I was being called into something new, something elevated, a new realm. And I speak for a living. And 4 days after my mom passed, I was on stage in front of 400 people in Southeast Minnesota, and I shared the story of my mom passing, and it was incredibly powerful. I felt different. I was new. I was bigger on the inside. And it actually prepared me for when my brother passed, where I was like, this is actually here to elevate me. I don't know why. Again, we can search for answers why, and I would challenge your listeners, don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out why, but try to look for the lesson. Where is the correction? What is the thing that you're seeing? Why, what possibly is there something inside of you that's being reflected back through this process that you can correct and grow and expand to a new level? And if you engage with that, God will take you up, and you'll see these cataclysmic events as opportunities, portals to elevate to a new level.
Absolutely. I have so many questions. I could have you on again and again and again because I have so many questions. And I love casting hope to our listeners and families on the dementia journey. I can so relate to what you're talking about in so many aspects. What part of your mother lives in you today?
That's a good question. You know, at her core, she was incredibly compassionate. And so was my brother. They were incredibly compassionate people, to fault in some regards, right? And that was a piece of me that hasn't been developed until recently, and I want to keep that going. Again, I was so afraid that I would put task above people, and because of several events, again, including my journey with my mom and the loss of my brother and all of the things, right? I think I've done a better job of slowing down and just looking at the person. Is chaotic as my childhood was at times. My mom was always looking out for me. And again, that is what I was incredibly thankful for. Did she make the best decisions? No. But at the end of the day, she was always looking out what was best for me through her eyes at that time with the tool set that she had. And so that is hopefully something that I'm able to tap into. But as I look back to that piece being developed in me, I think that was something from her that I got. And so again, that's something I'm really, really grateful for. That's a phenomenal question. Thank you for asking that. Nobody's ever asked me that before.
Really? Okay.
No.
I have one last one, and it occurred to me this morning, right? It occurred to me as I was thinking about your story and your life and just you in general and your personality. So you're very motivating, so you're in the right role. I will tell you that. But have you considered the connection between weather forecasting and navigating the emotional storms in your life?
That is a question I've never been asked before. That is good. You're like 5 for 5 or 6 for 6. That's good. Boy, that is a good one. I think that when people ask me about the weather, or when they did, I would usually give them some sarcastic remark because they're coming to me because they think I have some secret information that they don't have. And so when people would say like, how much snow are we going to get? Or what's, how hot is it going to get next Tuesday? Or how cold is it going to be next week? You know what I would say sarcastically? I'd say like, well, I guess we'll just find out together. You know what I mean? Well, we're all going to find out together. It's going to do what it's going to do. I hear people say with weather, like, well, it wasn't supposed to rain today. It's not supposed to snow tomorrow. It's like, it's not supposed to do anything. It's going to do whatever it's going to do. You see my point? And so that what I teach people is I teach people to release attachment to the outcome. It is what it is. It might turn out better than what you thought. It might turn out worse. You might be given the world. Everything might be taken from you. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you, like, if you engage with this process, that you're never going to have a challenge. You're never going to have loss. You're never going to experience pain. I'm not saying that. What I'm telling you though is that, like, lose attachment to the outcome. Surrender to what God has in store for you. And the interesting thing is that I see people elevate, including me, more the more I lose attachment to how it turns out. That doesn't mean I don't work. That doesn't mean I don't put in the effort. That doesn't mean I don't, do what I got to do. But at the same time too, I create a level of wholeness where with whatever happens, happens. Doesn't matter. That's not up to me. God has just asked me to do the work that he's called me to do. The rest is up to him. In fact, there's a saying that I usually use from stage. I say, you start it, God finishes it. You start it, God finishes it. So that's an interesting question, but that's how I would answer that. With the weather, it is what it is. It is what it, no matter how you forecast it and what you think is going to happen is irrelevant. And life's kind of like that. You've got your plans. That's great. But whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that's that loss of, or that release of attachment. And that's where the most powerful people lie. They say, I could be given the world or it could be taken from me. And I'm gonna justify it on behalf of my creator regardless. And that's what I've chosen to do. And again, God keeps elevating me and allowing these hard things even to bring me to the next level.
Jerrid, you have been a most interesting guest. I knew you would be. I would love to have you back. But as we close, absolutely, I'd love to give you space to speak directly to the people listening, whether it's an individual person or a group. Why don't you close us out with what you have to say to people who have someone with dementia? And it's a reality everywhere. Take it away.
I never thought that the story of my mom was going to end the way that it did. For many years, I thought it was going to be this Cinderella ending and, the light bulbs were going to come on and, she was going to find healing and you know what? It didn't turn out that way, and that's okay. But it also turned out a lot better than what it could have. And so there's a question I'll usually pose to audiences before I let them go on stages. And I ask the question, what else is possible? So you're on a road, the trajectory isn't great. And again, it's not for you to micromanage that. It's for you to be open to what is possible, lose attachment to the outcome, but be in a posture that the miraculous could happen. That anything could happen, that at any moment there could be some breakthrough and opportunity that you just cannot see. And so every morning, like this morning, before that we recorded this podcast, I went on a walk early today at sunrise and I just said, God, what else is possible today? How is my mind going to get blown today? And some days my mind is blown more than others, and that's irrelevant. I'm in a posture of always receiving. And so I think that this life is really about receiving. It's about the doing, but it's about the receive. We can receive more than we could ever do with our own two hands. And so while many of your situations are difficult and hard and tumultuous, and it seems like it's all negative, posture yourself in a state of receiving and always ask the question, what else is possible? Because you just never know what breakthrough could come. And even if the outcome doesn't turn out the way that you wish it or want it to, receive the blessing that is there and be thankful for it. And those are the most powerful people. Those are the ones that get elevated to the next level. And so I bless you on this journey.
Jerrid, thank you. What strikes me most about Jerrid's story is not the hardship he lived through, but the transformation that followed. Dementia did not rewrite his story, didn't rewrite his mom's story, but it gave a chance that it could reveal underlying traits, underlying emotions, the caring that he had, the strong relationship that he had with his mother. Today, if you're listening to the podcast, I want you to like, subscribe, and share this story with anyone that you think may benefit. The Disappearing Mind is near and dear to my heart. I create it. I speak on it. I continue to do it because I care. And I'm so passionate about this disease. I'm passionate about a cure, but I'm passionate about the journey and the people that it impacts. I hope that you will continue to listen. I want you to know you're not alone. There are many people that can relate to where you're at, no matter where that is. But until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. Visit our website to suggest future topics and share the podcast with friends and family.